On April 10th, 2022, Roki Sasaki of the Chiba Marines threw an utterly dominant perfect game. By most measures, it was the best game thrown in the history of Major Pro Baseball. Naturally, a bunch of us NPB YouTubers and creators went and have made YouTube videos about it. Lest you think I'm taking pot shots, I wrote a write-up for the baseball subreddit during the 9th inning while I was sitting on my best friend's couch at 3:30 in the morning and posted it pretty much the second he got the final out. It's my second most upvoted post on the sub. So, yeah. But instead of making a quick and dirty video on how important this was, I decided to take a quick deep dive into the first perfect games thrown in NPB history, because both have very interesting stories. From 1936 to 1949, what we know as the JBL Era, nobody threw a perfect game. Now, there were plenty of no-hitters, especially during the war years when the talent pool was severely depleted, but no perfect games. Doesn't mean guys didn't come close though. On April 14th, 1940, Hankyu's Katsusaburo Asano came inches away from a perfect game against the Osaka Tigers, but gave up a lone walk to right fielder Minoru Yamane. Yamane was one of the worst hitters on the Tigers roster, but his OBP was 120 points higher than his average. Doesn't make it good though. He played a grand total of 83 pro games over 4 seasons for a reason. Even the god-awful 1950 Swallows didn't want him and cut him after 9 games. On September 6th, 1948, Taiyo Robin's ace Juzo Sanada had a perfect game going in the second half of a doubleheader with the Tigers, but lost it on an error from Robin's shortstop Kazuo Matsumoto. Not a surprise really, Matsumoto made 54 errors that year and put up a -7 DRS. 2 years later, Matsumoto was the best defensive shortstop in the league. Because baseball. It wouldn't be until NPB's inaugural season in 1950 that we'd finally see a perfect game, when Yomiuri Giants ace Hideo Fujimoto stepped onto the mound at a countryside game at Aomori Stadium to face the Fukuoka Nishi-Nippon Pirates. Now, June of 1950 was a very weird time for the new league. 5 teams in Central League were competitive, 3 were not. While the Hiroshima Carp had the benefit of NPB's higher-ups pushing teams to play there for PR reasons, the Pirates and Kokutetsu Swallows were not as lucky. They had spent most of early to mid-June just not playing games. Eventually, Kokutetsu, one of the largest conglomerates in Japan, used their political power to force the league to remember that there were 8 teams, not 6. NPB had also decided that late June was the countryside games circuit, where the 16 teams toured around the country playing wherever they thought could feasibly host a game. And that's how we found ourselves way up north in the freshly built Aomori Municipal Stadium, which held a grand total of 10,000 people. However, 20,000 people had packed the surrounding area for this event. 4 teams were in town: the Giants, the Robins, the Carp, and the Pirates. These 4 clubs had been put into a group and had previously stopped at Maruyama Stadium in Sapporo, where the Giants had played the Robins and the Carp had played the Pirates. While the Robins and Giants battled to a 3-2 finish, the Pirates put on an absolute show. They had used the field's slightly smaller dimensions to beat up on Carp ace Ryohei Hasegawa, hitting a grand total of 7 home runs and winning by a score of 20-6. So as you can imagine, the Pirates, despite their poor record, are feeling themselves. As stated earlier, the man they'd be facing was the Giants' ace, Paul Ryong-lee. Oh wait, did I just use his birth name? Sorry, Hideo Fujimoto. The Busan-born right-hander had been the Giants' ace since 1943, despite Takehiko Besho muscling in on that position. Fujimoto was fresh off picking up his 3rd ERA title, as well as the 1949 Aiji Sawamura Award, and wasn't too far away from his JBL record .7 ERA season. Fujimoto also constantly had a chip on his shoulder. Being Korean, he felt that he'd never gotten the respect he deserved from his peers and the media. Meanwhile, Besho, being full-blooded Japanese, got a lot more slack. In the aforementioned game against the Robins, Besho had given up 2 home runs, but was largely forgiven by the media because the Giants ended up winning in the end. Both had thrown no-hitters in 1943, and Besho's was held up as the greater achievement than Fujimoto's, despite Fujimoto throwing his against a better team in a more hitter-friendly ballpark. Fujimoto actually wasn't slated to start this game. But Fukuzo Tada ate too many crab legs and had come down with food poisoning, so manager Shigeru Mizuhara had gone for the next guy in the rotation, Fujimoto. Small problem, Fujimoto was dead tired and hungover, because he'd been drinking and playing mahjong on the ferry over the previous night, assuming he wasn't due to start. So he groggily took the mound and shut the Pirates down. While he would only strike out 7 batters, he managed to take down 2 of the Pirates' best hitters twice, Masaaki Hirai and Yukichi Nagatoshi. It was a fantastic performance, but we have basically no record of it. Because of the 20,000 who swarmed the stadium that day, there were only 4 reporters, and no cameramen. Such as life out in the boonies. Those who were there described it as a fairly routine game, with novelist Rei Nakanishi, who was acting as the Giants' bat boy, stating that it was a fairly boring game compared to the Carp-Robbins game that happened that day. Famous playwright Shuji Terayama watched both games from the stands and echoed these sentiments. So, that's the first perfect game in NPB history, played out in the boonies by a guy working on Little Sleep in front of 20,000 people, and yet we have no photographic evidence of it. And unless any of you have a great-grandfather in Aomori who happened to be there and has a photo of it, we probably never will. But, as you can imagine, this is a massive point of pride for Aomori, and there's a monument to Fujimoto's achievement outside Aomori Municipal Stadium, which now primarily hosts the Prefectural High School baseball tournament. The Pirates wouldn't last long. At the end of the season, they were forced to merge with the PL's Fukuoka Nishitetsu Clippers, thanks to a conflict of interest allegation against their owners, Nishi-Nippon Shimbun. Nishitetsu would rename the merged team the Lions, and they still play to this day as the Saitama Seibu Lions. And if you thought that was odd, the first one thrown in PL was arguably weirder. Unlike Hideo Fujimoto, who was the best pitcher of his era, our protagonist comes from much humbler beginnings. Fumio Tanaka had recently emerged as the ace of the Kintetsu Pearls, coming off a 1954 season where he went 26-15 with a 2.17 ERA, 3.07 FIP, and a WHIP just under 1, good for 5.8 WAR. However, after getting married and taking his wife's last name, Takechi, he was struggling thus far into the 1955 season. He was 2-6 with an ERA of over 6.5 coming into June 19th, and thanks to a couple bullpen demotions, the title of ace had shifted to sophomore pitcher Noboru Yamashita. On the upside, Takechi had just logged his first quality start on June 2nd against the Flyers. 4,000 people shuffled into Osaka Stadium to watch the doubleheader between the Pearls and the Daiei Stars. Why so few? Well, it was a 4th place team playing a 7th place team, neither of whom had any hope in hell of catching up with the top 3. Even though it was only June, this was basically a meaningless schedule filler to entertain whoever wanted to show up. Game 1 of the doubleheader was actually pretty exciting. Pearl starter Junso Sakine had given up 9 hits, but managed to hold it together and pitch a complete game shutout, while adding a bases-clearing triple from the plate. It won't surprise you to learn that in 1957, Sakine transferred from the mound to the outfield and became an above-average offensive player for most of the rest of his career. So, Takechi had the benefit of facing a tired and frustrated Stars squad in the second game, and he went to work. Not only did he throw a perfect game, he Maddoxed it. 89 pitches, that's all it took. His opposite number, Toshio Takamatsu, wasn't too bad either, but he was pulled after giving up the lone run of the game. Who drove that run in? Katsuhiko Hara, the Pearls catcher, who was batting 167 on the year. A year that would prove to be his only full-time NPB season. Again, baseball. Takechi wasn't a stranger to this kind of luck. When he was 18 years old, he was forced into a kamikaze unit, but on the day he was supposed to fly his one-way sortie, a typhoon hit and forced the air group to turn back. The second attempt was cancelled when the war ended. The crazier thing? Takechi nearly did it again that season. Playing the Stars again on August 30th in front of a measly 500 people, he had a perfect game through 8 innings. But pinch hitter Takashi Hata had managed to sneak one through the infield in the 9th. Takechi wasn't bothered, he just wanted the game over with so he could jet back to Osaka and witness the birth of his daughter. 5 years after Takechi passed away in 2013, his family donated the ball from his perfect game to the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame, where it now sits prominently on display. And so, That's the story of the first 2 perfect games in NPB history. A hungover, barely awake star pitcher playing in front of a raucous countryside crowd, and an ace caliber arm with a chip on his shoulder taking advantage of an exhausted and frustrated squad in front of a stadium that was 80% empty. Perfect games are funny like that. On any given day, you just never know. And honestly, isn't that the beauty of baseball? Hey, I'm back. Sorry it's been so long between videos. I've had a lot of real life stuff to contend with, mainly school. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to feed the algorithm and have a good one. Bye.